Book 4, Chapter 3. The rooms that Mejnour occupied consisted of 2 chambers communicating with each other, and a third in which he slept. All these rooms were placed in a huge square tower that beetled over the dark and bush-grown precipice. The first chamber which Glyndon entered was empty. With a noiseless step he passed on, and opened the door that admitted into the inner one. He drew back at the threshold, overpowered by a strong fragrance which filled the chamber. A kind of mist thickened the air rather than obscured it, for this vapor was not dark, but resembled a snow cloud moving slowly, and in heavy undulations, wave upon wave, regularly over the space. A mortal cold struck to the Englishman's heart, and his blood froze. He stood rooted to the spot, and as his eyes strained involuntarily through the vapor, he fancied, for he could not be sure that it was not the trick of his imagination, that he saw dim, spectre-like, but gigantic forms floating through the mist. Or was it not rather the mist itself that formed its vapors fantastically into those moving, impalpable, and bodiless apparitions? A great painter of antiquity is said, in a picture of Hades, to have represented the monsters that glide through the ghostly river of the dead so artfully that the eye perceived at once that the river itself was but a spectre, and the bloodless things that tenanted it had no life, their forms blending with the dead waters, till, as the eye continued to gaze, it ceased to discern them from the preternatural element they were supposed to inhabit. Such were the moving outlines that coiled and floated through the mist. But before Glyndon had even drawn a breath in this atmosphere, for his life itself seemed arrested or changed into a kind of horrid trance, he felt his hand seized, and he was led from that room into the outer one. He heard the door close, his blood rushed again through his veins, and he saw Mejnour by his side. Strong convulsions then suddenly seized his whole frame. He fell to the ground insensible. When he recovered, he found himself in the open air in a rude balcony of stone that jutted from the chamber, the stars shining serenely over the dark abyss below, and resting calmly upon the face of the mystic, who stood beside him with folded arms.
"Young man," said Mejnour, "judge by what you have just felt, how dangerous it is to seek knowledge until prepared to receive it. Another moment in the air of that chamber, and you had been a corpse."
"Then of what nature was the knowledge that you, once mortal like myself, could safely have sought in that icy atmosphere which it was death for me to breathe?" "Mejnour," continued Glyndon, and his wild desire, sharpened by the very danger he had passed, once more animated and nerved him, "I am prepared at least for the first steps. I come to you, as of old, the pupil to the Hierophant, and demand the initiation." Mejnour passed his hand over the young man's heart. It beat loud, regularly, and bold. He looked at him with something almost like admiration in his passionless and frigid features, and muttered half to himself,
"Surely in so much courage the true disciple is found at last."
Then, speaking aloud, he added,
"Be it so. Man's first initiation is in trance. In dreams commences all human knowledge. In dreams hovers over measureless space the first faint bridge between spirit and spirit, this world and the worlds beyond. Look steadfastly at yonder star."
Glyndon obeyed, and Mejnour retired into the chamber, from which there then slowly emerged a vapor, somewhat paler and of fainter odor than that which had nearly produced so fatal an effect on his frame. This, on the contrary, as it coiled around him, and then melted in thin spires into the air, breathed a refreshing and healthful fragrance. He still kept his eyes on the star, and the star seemed gradually to fix and command his gaze. A sort of languor next seized his frame, but without, as he thought, communicating itself to the mind. And as this crept over him, he felt his temples sprinkled with some volatile and fiery essence. At the same moment, a slight tremor shook his limbs and thrilled through his veins. The languor increased. Still he kept his gaze upon the star, and now its luminous circumference seemed to expand and dilate. It became gradually softer and clearer in its light. Spreading wider and broader, it diffused all space. All space seemed swallowed up in it, and at last, in the midst of a silver-shining atmosphere, he felt as if something burst within his brain, as if a strong chain were broken, and at that moment a sense of heavenly liberty, of unutterable delight, of freedom from the body, of bird-like lightness, seemed to float him into the space itself.
"Whom now upon earth dost thou wish to see?"
whispered the voice of Mejnour. "Viola and Zanoni," answered Glyndon in his heart, but he felt that his lips moved not. Suddenly, at that thought, through all this space, in which nothing save one mellow translucent light had been discernible, a swift succession of shadowy landscapes seemed to roll. Trees, mountains, cities, seas, glided along like the changes of a phantasmagoria, and at last, settled and stationary, he saw a cave by the gradual marge of an ocean shore, myrtles and orange trees clothing the gentle banks. On a height, at a distance, gleamed the white but shattered relics of some ruined heathen edifice, and the moon, in calm splendor, shining over all, literally bathed with its light two forms without the cave, at whose feet the blue waters crept, and he thought that he even heard them murmur. He recognized both the figures. Zanoni was seated on a fragment of stone. Viola, half reclining by his side, was looking into his face, which was bent down to her, and in her countenance was the expression of that perfect happiness which belongs to perfect love.
"Wouldst thou hear them speak?"
whispered Mejnour, and again, without sound, Glyndon inly answered yes. Their voices then came to his ear, but in tones that seemed to him strange. So subdued were they, and sounding, as it were, so far off, that they were as voices heard in the visions of some holier men from a distant sphere. "And how is it," said Viola, "that thou canst find pleasure in listening to the ignorant?"
"Because the heart is never ignorant, because the mysteries of the feelings are as full of wonder as those of the intellect. If at times thou canst not comprehend the language of my thoughts, at times also I hear sweet enigmas in that of thy emotions."
"Ah, say not so," said Viola, winding her arm tenderly round his neck, and under that heavenly light her face seemed lovelier for its blushes. "For the enigmas are but love's common language, and love should solve them. Till I knew thee, till I lived with thee, till I learned to watch for thy footstep when absent, yet even in absence to see thee everywhere, I dreamed not of how strong and all-pervading is the connection between nature and the human soul. And yet," she continued, "I am now assured of what I at first believed, that the feelings which attracted me towards thee at first were not those of love. I know that, by comparing the present with the past. It was a sentiment then wholly of the mind or the spirit. I could not hear thee now say, 'Viola, be happy with another.'"
"And I could not now tell thee so. Ah, Viola, never be weary of assuring me that thou art happy."
"Happy while thou art so. Yet at all times, Zanoni, thou art sad."
"Because human life is so short, because we must part at last, because yon moon shines when the nightingale sings to it no more. A little while, and thine eyes will grow dim, and thy beauty haggard,
and these locks that I toy with now will be gray and loveless." "And thou, cruel one," said Viola touchingly, "I shall never see the signs of age in thee, but shall we not grow old together, and our eyes be accustomed to a change which the heart shall not share?" Zanoni sighed. He turned away and seemed to commune with himself. Glyndon's attention grew yet more earnest. "But were it so," muttered Zanoni, and then, looking steadfastly at Viola, he said with a half-smile, "Hast thou no curiosity to learn more of the lover thou once couldst believe the agent of the evil one?" "None. All that one wishes to know of the beloved one, I know, that thou lovest me."
"I have told thee that my life is apart from others. Wouldst thou not seek to share it?"
"I share it now."
"But were it possible to be thus young and fair forever, till the world blazes round us as one funeral pyre?"
"We shall be so when we leave the world."
Zanoni was mute for some moments, and at length he said, "Canst thou recall those brilliant and aerial dreams which once visited thee, when thou didst fancy that thou wert preordained to some fate aloof and afar from the common children of the earth?"
"Zanoni, the fate is found."
"And thou hast no terror of the future?"
"The future? I forget it. Time past, present, and to come reposes in thy smile. Ah, Zanoni, play not with the foolish credulities of my youth. I have been better and humbler since thy presence has dispelled the mist of the air. The future, well, when I have cause to dread it, I will look up to heaven and remember who guides our fate." As she lifted her eyes above, a dark cloud swept suddenly over the scene. It wrapped the orange trees, the azure ocean, the dense sands, but still the last images that it veiled from the charmed eyes of Glyndon were the forms of Viola and Zanoni. The face of the one, rapt, serene, and radiant. The face of the other, dark, thoughtful, and locked in more than its usual rigidness of melancholy beauty and profound repose.
"Rouse thyself," said
Mejnour.
"Thy ordeal has commenced. There are pretenders to the solemn science who could have shown thee the absent, and prated to thee, in their charlatanic jargon, of the secret electricities and the magnetic fluid, of whose true properties they know but the germs and elements. I will lend thee the books of those glorious dupes, and thou wilt find, in the dark ages, how many erring steps have stumbled upon the threshold of the mighty learning, and fancied they had pierced the temple. Hermes and Albert and Paracelsus, I knew ye all, but noble as ye were fated to be deceived. Ye had not souls of faith and daring, fitted for the destinies at which ye aimed. Yet Paracelsus, modest Paracelsus, had an arrogance that soared higher than all our knowledge. Ho, ho! He thought he could make a race of men from chemistry. He arrogated to himself the divine gift, the breath of life. He would have made men, and, after all, confessed that they could be but pygmies. My art is to make men above mankind. But you are impatient of my digressions. Forgive me. All these men, they were great dreamers, as you desire to be, were intimate friends of mine. But they are dead and rotten. They talked of spirits, but they dreaded to be in other company than that of men. Like orators whom I have heard, when I stood by the Pnyx of Athens, blazing with words like comets in the assembly, and extinguishing their ardor like holiday rockets when they were in the field. Ho, ho! Demosthenes, my hero coward,
how nimble were thy heels at Chaeronea, and thou art impatient still.
Boy, I could tell thee such truths of the past as would make thee the luminary of schools.
But thou lustest only for the shadows of the future.
Thou shalt have thy wish,
but the mind must first be exercised and trained.
Go to thy room and sleep.
Fast austerely.
Read no books.
Meditate, imagine, dream. Bewilder thyself if thou wilt.
Thought shapes out its own chaos at last.
Before midnight, seek me again.